So, welcome back. We are the Contrarians, and we are back at it again with another panel. This is a Dark Horse panel. So today we are going to be talking about the Alice Cooper album DaDa. A couple of housekeeping things before we get started. If you like what you're seeing, if you like conversations about rock and heavy metal, please give a like and subscribe if you want to see more. Tell your friends. And there's other ways to support the channel as well. They're in the description below. But most importantly, thank you for being here. I want to thank all of our panelists for being here as well. And I'm having a little bit of an asthma day today, so you might hear me breathing a little bit extra, so I'll apologize for that in advance.
All right.
Today we're going to be talking about DaDa by Alice Cooper. It's the 8th studio album by him, and it's released on September 28th, 1983. We're going to go around to each of our panelists. And Martin, I want to give you the choice. Do you want to go first or last? And did you want to give any more information about the album? Usually you got that.
Yeah, okay, I'll go first. What the heck? Information about this album, the famous sort of blackout period. I'll try not to say everything. But yeah, we've got Flush the Fashion in 80, Special Forces 81, Zipper Catches Skin. This record didn't certify at all. It didn't make the top 200, wasn't played live, wasn't toured. Recorded northwest of Toronto in just like a farm studio. I can't get that out of my head once I learned all that, basically. So I just had this book come out. This is my old Alice Cooper book has been turned into 2 trade paperbacks. And one is Easy Action, the original years, and this one is just about the solo years. But I actually interviewed Graham Shaw, who was part of this album, and I'll just read a quick quote. So Alice was doing okay. He wasn't on the pipe. He'd wake up and be drinking. He was civil and coherent, and I wouldn't call him energetic or motivated. And then he left for about a little lapse for about 10 days. He just went back to Los Angeles, then he came back and they finished it up. But he was a pleasant guy. I liked him. We got along fine, but you could tell he was kind of mildly embalmed from sunup to sundown. And Dick was delightful throughout the whole thing. I quite liked him, and I respect his talents and consideration as well. I remember him fondly. But after Alice came back, he looked a lot better. He was fine. He's a pleasant guy. So Alice did his thing, and Bob was doing the wrangling, that kind of thing, that there wasn't a lot of fights. Bob has to be the biggest swinging dick there, right? And so nobody really fights about that much. He does have the final word. I wasn't artistically committed to the point where I would get in a big fight about it. I also interviewed Dick Wagner, who we've lost now, on this. He says, I think it's an excellent album, very experimental, yet very musical. It's interesting, though, that people would think it's weak. I just think that musically it's very good. It may not be hit songs, but then again, it wasn't published by Warner. Or pushed by Warner, so there could be hit songs. The musicality and imagery, especially formerly Warmer, it's really about leaving Warner Brothers. It was the last album for Warner. All the imagery there was about Warner's, like the evil old man in the attic and leaving Warner Brothers, but there are a lot of spooky, cool songs on that album. I'll stop there. The front cover, based on a Salvador Dali painting. So it's got nothing to do with DaDa, not the Bauhaus DaDa people. It's Dali. So there's your first clue that something's wrong here, right? But so this record, I mean, I'll just say that in a general sense, it's the last 2 records, not Flush the Fashion, but Zipper Catches Skin and Special Forces, I would say are more like punky, new wavy, up-tempo, jerky, herky-jerky, new wavy hard rock. Right. More conventionally recorded. This one is definitely much more synth recorded, much more treatment on the drums. It's much more morose and proggy and Broadway-ish. You got Bob Ezrin coming in off the wall and the Elder. I just picture these guys sitting up there, on a farm north of Toronto. It's not really a studio. They're doing their thing. From what I gather, I've got Alice Cooper quotes in this book as well. I won't reopen it up and go through that, but he admits now to being the Blackout albums. But it's amazing how well that secret was kept, that he was that bad. That was like 8 balls and coke and drinking and hallucinating and paranoia and the whole thing through this period. But it sounds like at least if you kind of trust what Graham Shaw is saying, that possibly he was maybe in a little bit better shape or a little better behaved here than he was during Special Forces era, for example. But yeah, I think this album sounds like a cross between electronic new waviness and kind of the songwriting of From the Inside and Alice Cooper Goes to Hell and Lace and Whiskey. It's a little flippant, but it's a little Broadway-ish. It's all over the place. Dyslexia is definitely the quirkiest thing here. It's very Devo-like. I made a note saying it reminds me of Devo crossed with Bad Stranglers, like 10 and Dreamtime series era Stranglers. I Love America is just like the Tubes meets Elected. It reminds me of, it's got the talking bit that reminds me of What Do You Want from Life from the first Tubes album. Fresh Blood is like a funky one with horns, and that's probably fake horns, Graham Shaw and Oberheim. Pass the Gun Around, again, dark, Broadway-ish. It reminded me a little of Ozzy Revelations, but also like Elton John and David Bowie, and Fresh Blood's more like the bad David Bowie of, Never Let Me Down and Tonight era kind of thing. But Formerly Warmer, very creepy song. DaDa, incredibly creepy. Like, that's such a strange, weird, that whole instrumental opening. So yeah, it's kind of all over the place. But I guess in a general sense, what I would say is that this reminds me of almost like a new wave version of From the Inside. I'll leave it at that. And my grade, I guess, I'm going to go for it's a pretty serious album that you can take seriously, right? That's kind of a neat thing about it. Alice Cooper's got a lot of, you get into Constrictor and Raise Your Fist and Yell and stuff, and it's kind of like kiddie rock time again, right? It's Halloween-y rock, right? This feels kind of like it's got some strange gravitas to it. It's kind of odd that way. And, even against the previous two albums, which, like I say, are a little more up-tempo, herky-jerky, punky sounding and heavy. So yeah, I'll go 6.5 out of 10 on this. There's a little bit of that so bad it's good, or is it just good? And you can debate that whole thing. There you go, 6.5.
All right, awesome. Well, let's keep it moving right along. Thanks so much, Martin. Let's go to Tim next for his review. Let's see if you agree, disagree, or maybe somewhere else in the middle.
Thanks, Nick. This is, as much as Alice is considered to be like a shock rock pioneer, and during the early 70s, he shocked parents and shocked, the authority figures and stuff. And, a lot of his, it's built for, his makeup and everything. There's a scariness to it, but he's not in makeup in this period. And I think this is his scariest album. I really do. Not only scary in its construction, but when you know just how bad a shape that he was in, and he almost died. This is the sound of that. Like, he was obviously a very functional addict. And Martin's right. You'd hear little wisps and rumors of him dabbling in things, not just alcohol, because he always talked about alcohol and going to, rehab. But that was the 77, 78 period. You get to the early 80s and you watch some of those clips, and he's practically skeletal. There's nothing to the man. And the herky-jerky movements on stage, there's some really good black and white footage of him from the Special Forces tour on YouTube from I think it's from the Capitol Theater. I like the material. Like, I really like Flush the Fashion. I really like Special Forces. And I really like Zipper Catches Skin too. Probably Flush the Fashion is my favorite of those ones. This one's, I'm not so quick with the praise on it, because it is it's just weird. I mean, people talk about Alice, weird and scary Alice. This is weird and scary Alice. It also happens to be, of his major label albums, probably the most obscure weird and scary. And it was the tail end. It was the last album he did for Warner Brothers. They literally just 80, 81, 82, 83, bang, 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 threw those albums out. In Zipper Catches Skin and DaDa, there was no touring for. I don't think there were any videos for any of those albums. There's a clones clip that I see, but I don't actually think that was a video. I think that was from a variety show, and people just refer to it as the video. But anyway, so DaDa, it's the first album that Ezrin produced, I think since Lace and Whiskey. So Bob Ezrin would come and go from recording and working with Alice several times. It is very electronic sounding. I don't actually think there are any real drums on this album. The exact verbiage in the album says much of this album was done using the CMI Fairlight computer. For the most part, the drums are not drums, but computer programs embellished with some live drumming. And there are, well, Ezrin is credited. The only drums, Ezrin's credited with drums, percussion. Richard Kolinka of Telephone, drums on formerly Warmer Scarlet and Sheba and Pass the Gun Around, drums on Fresh Blood. John Anderson, not assuming no relation to the S guy. I don't think there's any real drums. I think if anything, there's a drummer that did the programming, but I don't know. And atmospheric. If you if you want a good scare, a good jump scare, throw a good pair of headphones on and listen to the opening track, DaDa. Like that is just, it's just it. But then when you hear, and it's Alice's voice talking to someone, it's like I have a son, I have a daughter. He takes care of me. She takes care of me. Where is my son? Like, really unsettling, and it kind of sets the tone for the entire album. Now, it is kind of a concept album, but it does deviate from that. The first time I heard anything from this album is when I got his box set, The Life and Crimes of Alice Cooper, that came out in 1999, and the two songs featured on there were former Leave Warmer and I Love America. Now, I Love America is typical satirical Alice, and I think it's actually quite funny. I love the used car salesman bit, and then I love, here they come, there they go. It's got really nothing to do with the rest of the album because there's nothing upbeat and positive and optimistic on the rest of this album, especially Pass the Gun Around. I mean, that's basically him admitting to his demons, and it's almost like the album's finished, and I think he might have thought, well, so am I. It's a really, really weird experience. So it's hard to go into it and not think about all of that. I mean, vocally, he sounds the same as he ever does. He sounds fine. The new wave approach, I think, really worked for him on Flush the Fashion. But yeah, Martin's right. It almost is like his... If From the Inside was his rehab album, this is like the anti-rehab album, where it's the pre-second rehab album set to a new wave beat. And, Dyslexia is just a silly little, it is kind of sounds like Devo. And in, some bizarro universe, if he'd have shot a video for it, it might have got some video play on MTV, and he might have had this weird out of left field hit with it, because it is catchy in its sort of inanity. Formerly Warmers is a very, very creepy song. It never clued into me before that it was about him finishing his Warner Brothers contract. That's interesting. And there's not really any, the only picture inside here is, I think, a very old picture of Alice. And I don't know who the old man is. So I think that might speak to, there's not even any pictures of him inside of this. So that he obviously wasn't in very good shape. And I think Ezrin has admitted he wasn't in very good shape in this period either. Yeah, it's interesting. It's got Lisa Del Bello on some background vocals on Fresh Blood. You can hear her quite plainly. And it's not an album I listen to a lot, but I mean, it does have some merits. And it's a very, very interesting album if you're a historian and you've just got a few Alice albums and you haven't gotten to this one yet. Don't be afraid of it. But, approach with a little bit of caution, because it is very, very strange. But if you're into Alice Cooper, a little bit of strange is good. But my rating, I think I'm going to give it the same rating that Martin did. I'm going to give it 6.5 out of 10.
All right, awesome. Thanks, Tim. Yeah, very thoughtful as always. So we've got a consistent score going forward so far. Let's throw it over to Grant next. Grant, right. What are your thoughts?
Well, I just want to say that I was always intrigued by this record. I had never heard it. So when the topic came up, I thought, holy crap, I'm all into that. So I was able to get it. I had never listened to it before, but as soon as I heard DaDa, I was like, holy mackerel, what is going on here? I thought, is this like a concept album? Because I tried not to read anything really about it. So, and I thought, well, you know, we've got like 5 minutes of just experimental whatever. And I'm going, all right, that's interesting. And it is very interesting because, you know, you like Tim was saying, you've got Alice talking to like a therapist or something. And then it goes into Enough's Enough, which is another track, like dealing with a family type of issue and his father and all that. I thought, well, maybe this is setting the tone for the whole thing. But like Tim was saying, it just goes off into several different things. You know, Formerly Warmer, depending on how you read it, could have been part of that same type of rock opera or whatever you want to call it, concept record. But boy, is Formerly Warmer, it's just very creepy, you know. In fact, the whole thing, the whole first side, like Tim said, it's very creepy, but I think it's great. I want to say that middle 8 part on Formerly Warmer, I swear to God, it sounded like an outtake from Destroyer. You got Dick Wagner on it, and I know it's all Fairlight, but I would swear that it came off a Destroyer, and I was going, holy crap, that's kind of refreshing. And the other thing I want to mention before I go on is that you have to consider this. Don't forget, this is very early in the whole digital sampling thing. 1983, that's early. And I want to give Bob Ezrin some props because I think he did a wonderful job on it. I mean, the digital drums don't sound all that bad. You know, the strings and the flutes or whatever, the arrangement, I don't think I really had to listen to it, you know, and then I read about it and then found out that it was all basically sampled. I get it. They're going to have a lot of that type of drum machine stuff, but I think it's all well done. I mean, for me to be fooled with that whole middle 8 part and Formerly Warmer, I was like, holy crap. All right. Dyslexia is funny because Martin mentioned that he mentioned Devo, and I wrote down here, it sounds like Devo from Freedom of Choice. That's what I put on my notes.
Yeah.
And which is fine. I think it works well. Maybe hardcore Alice Cooper people may find it terribly terrible, but I don't. You'll be surprised with my end rating, I think. Scarlet and Sheba, I think it's a great track, great melody, and it's got great production. I think Bob Ezrin hit it out of the park on this record. I like it a lot. Everything sounds big, everything sounds epic, everything sounds full. You know, like Tim said, Alice sounds great on it. And Dick Wagner, holy mackerel, as a guitar player. We all know that Dick Wagner always brought it to the table, but he's all over it, and he's got such a great tone, and his licks, I think, are top notch on this record. And you can tell that Bob and Dick had a lot to do with this record. I mean, they're just all over it, but I think it's a good combination. I mean, the whole combination of Dick, Bob, and Alice, I don't think you can beat it. I was going to say that track Scarlet and Sheba reminds me of something off of The Wall. In fact, a lot of this record sounds like The Wall to me. And I know what that was like 4 years before or whatever, but it has a lot of Wall in it. I Love America is a funny track. You know, that whole tongue-in-cheek thing. I think that's about it. But I think the sequencing on this record really works. I would have liked to see more of a concept record out of it because I do think it pretty much started out like that. But I think the sequencing's fine. I mean, Pass the Gun Around, what a great closing track. And like I said, Dick Wagner hits it out of the park on there. Great guitar solo. But I think for 1983, I'm very pleased with it. There are no gated drums. At least there might be digitally sampled drums, but I don't think this album is aged poorly. The only song that I really heard, well, I know you guys have mentioned, like, you know, the new waviness, but I think it's kind of all over the place. Only a couple of songs I would say that really have that new wavy thing, but Flesh and Blood, That's the song that really kind of stands out to me because it's almost funk. It's almost a dance track. I don't know if I'm really into that song so much, but it kind of reminds me of Flashdance. I don't know what they were going for there. But it's fine. It's all right. I think it's very creative and it's a great listen with headphones. I would recommend it to anybody that would want to listen to Alice Cooper. I'm going to give it, I'm just surprised that this album was so neglected because I think I like this album quite a bit. I'm going to give it an 8 out of 10. I liked it that much. And I liked it right out of on the first listen. And I think the more you listen to it, the more it grabs you and the more it takes you in. I really don't have any, I mean, it's a little bit all over the place with some of the tracks, but I think it's a great part of Alice's catalog, and everyone into Alice should take a look at it.
Cool. Hey, I want to just interject a little bit because there's some good comedy gold here. I'm just going to read off a couple more things to put this in context. So apparently, he was worried about his financial situation, and Shep had to write a check for $90,000 to have Alice be able to leave the country and get out and work. So it says, so they leave home. Wagner and Cooper end up writing the record in a massive 2-bedroom hotel suite in Toronto, drinking vodka every day. But, recalls Dick, not doing any drugs. They would write in the hotel room and then be down in the lounge at night into the early morning. Dick at the grand piano, Alice singing, sometimes rehearsing the songs that they'd written upstairs in the room. Sessions were casual, broken up by 3-hour lunches, with Bob going home in the evening and turning the production over to Dick, whose work the next day, as often as not, would get overruled. And then I guess I interviewed the studio owner, D. Long. So he says, I walked out of the sessions. I hung out and played pinball when they were working. Sometimes I'd hear them arguing. They did a lot of yelling. It was mostly over publishing who wrote what. I remember hearing a few tracks through the wall. I also remember that Alice and some of the Toronto Maple Leafs hockey team would sit and play cards in the front all day long while the rest of the guys were out back making the album. So...
Martin, was that D. Long from Klaatu?
Yeah, it probably is. Yeah,
Okay.
probably is. I guess he owned ESP Studios. There's a little weirdness about the studio, and there's some quotes in here about how some of it was at Phase 1 downtown and blah blah blah. It's all very murky, just like the album itself. But it just sounds like a weird situation, right?
You suppose it was a cost-cutting measure?
Yeah, somewhat. And it sounds there's some other entries in there right around that time where he was in dire shape back in Phoenix. So it was part of just getting him away from Phoenix, I think, too. So maybe it was, but there's another part reiterating in there that he was not doing crack and cocaine, but he admits he was drinking. But he says, but no more than I was in the Welcome to My Nightmare period sort of thing. So yeah, it sounds like at least maybe because he's in a different country too. And, the laws, maybe it's a little stricter and you can't move stuff over the border. Maybe that, quells your desire to try score. Right. So yeah, anyways, so enough of that. Go on.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Grant. That was great.
Sure.
We'll keep it moving right along. We'll go over to Reed next.
Okay. Well, as is sometimes going to be the case with the Contrarians, I think I had a vastly different listening experience to the rest of you with this album. I won't say I've been an enormous fan of Alice Cooper all my life. I, in fact, had never heard Alice Cooper until the 80s. I had heard of Alice Cooper. My wife is a huge Alice Cooper fan. So there's a lot of old school Alice Cooper around the house. I probably got into Alice Cooper first around the Constrictor and Raise Your Fist and Yell era, and then definitely Trash, although I thought Hey Stupid was an abysmal record. Over the last few years, I've been very slowly working my way through the Alice Cooper catalog. And for whatever reason, I have been avoiding what they call the blackout albums. So, I've got albums from the 70s, albums from the 80s, albums from the 21st century, but I hadn't listened to those late 70s, early 80s albums. So I really only dived into DaDa for this chat. I didn't know what to expect, which is the best way to go in. Now, I had violated my rule, and I tried to avoid listening to the drama before hearing the album, because this is going to be yet another one of those things where I don't hear any of the drama that you guys are talking about on this record. None of it. I don't hear the tiniest bit of emotional affectation or weight in this album. To me, this album is cabaret theater. It's an attempt to recreate Welcome to My Nightmare in 1983, done with the slightly less good songwriting that you would start to get from Alice Cooper Goes to Hell. Now, I still like Alice Cooper Goes to Hell. That's a good album, but it's a step down from Welcome to My Nightmare. Every song on this feels to me like, if you've ever seen the Welcome to My Nightmare TV special, that's what this album is to me. It's Alice Cooper on stage dancing around and acting out little tableaus. The music is very much in the background. Dick Wagner is playing his butt off, but it's way in the background. He's not like in the 1970s, the guitars are way up in your face. And probably in order to mix with the drums and synth, it's very trebly. It doesn't have that thick bottom end that you get from a 70s hard rock production. And I think that's where people say it's new wave sounding. I think there are only a couple of songs that I would identify as new wave, probably Dyslexia and No Man's Land kind of strike me as new wavy. But a lot of the rest of it, I'm just hearing this cabaret theater over and over again. And that is both the best and worst of Alice Cooper, because it allows him to be creative, but also to indulge in his worst impulses. I hate DaDa, the opening. 30 seconds, fine. Set the mood and go. The damn thing is almost 5 minutes long. It is the most pointless 5 minutes Alice Cooper ever put on an album. It's just, oh man, it wears out its welcome so quickly. On the other hand, you get to Enough Is Enough, or Enough's Enough, sorry. And I think it's a pretty good song, but I am constantly left thinking that this is an album of missed opportunities. Like, okay, there's a good track here, but you're getting about 70% of it. I'm just missing 30% of something that would make it into a really great song. Formerly Warner, it's a pantomime horror. No Man's Land, again, it's a new wave song. Dyslexia, okay, it's Alice Cooper does Devo. It's a novelty. I'm on board, I guess, to a point. Scarlet and Sheba is a fantastic song. If they had put Scarlet and Sheba on Alice Cooper Goes to Hell, that would have been a 10 out of 10. On this album, the production takes about 40% of my enjoyment out of the song. I Love America is annoying from start to finish. This is Alice Cooper indulging in all of his worst Alice Cooperisms. And it's got some really funny lines. But, this is Muppet Show Alice Cooper, right? I don't want to listen to Alice Cooper making stand-up jokes. I just want to listen to him singing. And then you get to Fresh Blood, my second favorite song on the album. And you know what? To me, Fresh Blood is the most contemporary sounding song. Most of the songs up until now have been very 70s because, again, it's Dick and Alice and Bob Ezrin. But Fresh Blood, that could have been on Thriller. I mean, it's very Michael Jackson, right? It's very contemporary for 1983. And then you get to Pass the Gun Around, and because of the way he delivers the material, I know it's super grim. It doesn't matter. It's got no emotional weight to it to me. He's so disassociated from it. He's like, hey, everything's great. I think I'll kill myself. It's just, I don't know. It doesn't make me feel bad. I could name some other bands that, some of their lyrics are in the exact same subject matter are a real sucker punch. And this has no emotional weight to it at all. So I think it turned out to be much more interesting than I was expecting. It's much more 70s than I was expecting, and it's much more Dick Wagner than I was expecting. And you guys know I love Dick Wagner and Steve Hunter. I think they are two of the best guitarists from the 1970s. This album's a bit all over the place. It annoys the crap out of me in places. It has some songs I love, but it's never better than about 70% of a great song, even on the best songs. I'm giving it 5 out of 10.
Nice. Good stuff, Reed. I like that.
Mm-hmm. I think as we got a pretty clear picture starting to form here. Grant's a little contrarian. Let's see how contrarian. We'll go with Butch last but not least. What are your thoughts, Butch?
Well, I kind of came into Alice proper in terms of being a fan probably around the same time Reed did. It was around Constrictor and Raise Your Fist and Yell, specifically Constrictor. I mean, early 80s is 81, 82 is when I was really starting to embrace music and hard rock. But, I was coming in, the albums I was coming in with were like Creatures of the Night and then Shout at the Devil and Mental Health and things like this. I mean, I had heard Alice on the radio, but, the radio was ignoring anything Alice past. Welcome to My Nightmare. It was a lot of Schools Out and, those old hits, 18 and Be My Lover. So I didn't know much about Alice's past work until I saw the Nightmare Returns concerts on MTV of all places. And that was kind of like his coming out party for going back to the, the hard rock and the makeup and all that stuff he was known for in the 70s. Which I think was effective to a point. Of those records didn't like light up the charts. Constrictor, Raise Your Fist and Yell, they reestablished him as the hard rock artist, which I think like the blackout period and what led up to it, had distanced him from over time. I find this album and the 3 before it are, especially this one for coming out in 83. I mean, strangely out of step with what was going on in hard rock at the time. I mean, it has some new wave-isms but Alice, I don't know that anyone remembers Alice thinks of him as a new wave icon. They think of him as a hard rock guy, and these records they have nothing to do with what people like me were buying at the time. So it was like I'd say like a losing effort for him in the first place to put out this record at the time that he did. I mean, it's creative. It has a lot of merit, but who the hell was buying this record? Then it was a cutout almost automatically. I used to see this in the cutout bins all the time, and it wasn't something I picked up until, once I got into his catalog and loved Alice, I was buying everything. And I always thought this album was kind of cool. There's some weird stuff. I mean, the whole album is odd. And the title track, that from the moment I first heard it, it's a weird way to start a record. I mean, okay, you have intros that are a couple minutes, like Atmosphere, that go into the first song, but like Reed said, to have it be 5-6 minutes long, but I still love it. I just, again, for the time, like, who the hell is doing that? But it's creepy, it's creepy soundtrack music. I always kind of enjoyed it. I don't even know if I could listen to it if I was alone in the house and it was totally dark. Like, it's freaky, that song. Some of the stuff, I mean, I like most of these songs. Enough's Enough, again, it's really like kind of cabaret, but the middle section kind of lifts the whole thing for me. So there are spots in these songs where he loses me, but then he comes up with something that pulls me back into it. And Formerly Warmer, I love. Although it's kind of like, to me, it's like I don't want to use the phrase poor man's, but it's kind of like a Steven, but not as good. Like, that's exactly what it reminds me of. And that's one of my favorite Alice Cooper songs. This has that same mood to it. Again, like, going back to what Reed said, it really does have a Welcome to My Nightmare, Goes to Hell vibe. But this is definitely my favorite song on the record. creepy. I too did not know it had anything to do with Warner Brothers until I'm trying to figure out what the story's about, other than a couple brothers with the evil one living up in the attic, until I looked it up online, and this thing came out about how it's, about him leaving Warner's. Well, I mean, I guess you have to really I feel like you have to go around the block a few times in the lyrics to get to that, but I mean, they're the ones that wrote it. So No Man's Land was okay. I thought the lyrics were pretty clever on there. It's kind of funny, the whole story about being a mall Santa Claus and a hot woman coming up to him and convincing him to leave, but she doesn't realize he's kind of a nutcase. I just thought it was funny. I mean, it's clever. Dyslexia, okay on. I mean, it's more of a new wave throwaway to me than, I mean, I like new wave, but this song was kind of like one of the throwaways in a record. I like Scarlet and Sheba. I thought that the production on it's like real 80s sounding, but the song itself is kind of like in line with his more dramatic kind of songs. Again, the chorus on this one kind of throws it off for me a little bit. I'm not as big into that, but I really like the verse, the chord progression, and the riff on that. I Love America. I mean, I know I find that one, it's while it's funny on the surface level, I mean, like some of these lines, I love the mountain with those four big heads. I love Velveeta slapped on Wonder Bread. I love a commie if he's good and dead. I mean, a lot of it seems like kind of, I don't know, it's kind of silly and funny, but there's a cynicism to that song that makes it actually pretty serious, I think. I mean, it's really like lampooning, your uber patriotic and American culture at large, really, like however the top everything always has to be. So that's where I find the merit in that song. It's hard to listen to it all the way through all the time, but because just the way it's set up, although it is funny that the car salesman bit in the middle, they try to keep it entertaining, but I can only do so much of that song. Fresh Blood is pretty cool. It's good for spooky season. I thought, it's a perfect song for this time of year, the whole story going on there. And Pass the Gun Around, I do like that song. You can clearly tell, I mean, the on the surface, he's talking about his alcoholism. It reminds me of something like Got to Give It Up by Thin Lizzy, where he's talking about his alcoholism, but alluding to the fact that he's killing himself, really, doing what he's doing. My overall impressions of this record, I think it's really good. I think it's good. I think the guitar work is really good on it. So the lyrics are dark, which I kind of like about. I like that it's kind of like a dark record. For him, I mean, it's definitely not an album that you point a new fan of Alice Cooper to. You want to point them somewhere else, probably, the original Alice Cooper band, or if you're going to do it solo, you're going to point to Welcome My Nightmare, or depending on who they are, Trash or something like The Constrictor. But for people who are into Cooper or want to know more, like, this period has some really interesting stuff in it. I don't know. It's not, this is not my favorite period of the band. I like a lot of what he did here. There's interesting things on all these records. It's not something I reach for all the time, but as something that when I'm tired of listening to Killer, I mean, for a change of pace, it's a record that I do pull out every once in a while and listen to. I don't know. I rate it probably about, I don't know, I'll be charitable and give it like a 7 out of 10, because it's hard for me to imagine that he was like in the state that he was. I really find these records to be more coherent, for sure, than my speech right now. More coherent and cohesive for someone who can't remember making them. Like, I don't know. My wife and I were discussing this earlier. Like, I don't know how he did that. I don't know how he made special forces and toured in the state that he was and remembered his words and wrote these songs. I mean, I know he had Ezrin and, but Ezrin was out of his mind on coke in the early, you hear stories about the Elder, like he was out of it. I know he had these guys kind of help him keep in line, but I think it's a creative record for someone in that shape. So yeah, I'll say a 7 out of 10. It's not essential, but I think, it's worth looking into. It's certainly not easy action or pretties for you. So, or hey, stupid.
Nice.
So that's my take on it.
Great.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thanks, Butch. All right. Well, that review actually gives us our average, and the average score is actually quite close to a 7. It's a 6.7. So I think, we've generally found the opinion of the panel here. We saw a lot of 6.5s. We saw an 8. We saw a 7. We saw a 5.5. So in general, I think this is no one's favorite Alice Cooper album, but I think the panel is giving a soft recommendation to try it. Maybe if you're interested in something weird. Pardon me. I want to thank all of our panelists for being here and for giving their reviews on this album. I want to thank all of you at home for being here with us and watching tonight, or this morning, or during the day, whenever you're watching. If you liked the episode, and if you like the other episodes, you can give a like and subscribe. That'd be great. You can share the channel with your friends, and there's other ways to support the channel in the description below. But again, thank you so much for being here. Thanks again to our panelists, and again, whether it's morning, day, or night, have a good one. Thanks,
All right.
everybody.
Thanks, guys. That was fun.
Night.
Thank
Talk
you
to
all.
you later. Good night.